Amen. Amen. I'm blessed in the name of the Lord for granting us this opportunity to continue sharing His words. And as recently we had shared from the book of John chapter number 17, verses 11 to verses 13, we are going to continue with the same scriptures, only that today we are going to talk about the purpose of being kept by God. Why does Jesus commend His disciples to be kept by God? Why does He ask the Father to keep His disciples? Why only the Father? Why not the angels? Christ was going to depart. He was going to go to heaven. He will be no more physically here on the earth. And He understands that His absence is going to have serious repercussions or effects in the lives of the disciples. And He knows that He has labored, He has worked in the lives of the disciples for 3.5 years. Ever since He called them, He has mentored them and He has known them. He has invested in them both time. He has invested in them even His resources. He has given them the words that the Father had given Him. Everything that the Father had given Him, the love the Father had shown Him, He had given them. So Christ had invested all that He was, all that He had, into the lives of the disciples. The first reason why, or the first purpose, was that these were the investments that Christ was leaving behind. Christ had given them the words of the Father. The disciples had received the words, and those words, when the disciples received them, the disciples had become Christ's. The disciples had become people that belong to God. It is those things that we have invested our time in, are the things that we would love to keep, are the things that we would love to watch, are the things that we would hate to lose, because these are the things that we have hoped in. When Christ was recommending the disciples to the keeping of God, it is because Christ hated losing them. And even He tells God that the ones whom you gave me, I have lost none of them except the son of perdition. These were the people that Christ had invested His time, everything that He had, into them, and Christ would not want to lose any. So even in His absence, Christ would still want them to remain the way they were, under His care, and no one could keep them except God. And Christ understood that unless God watches over a city, then the watchmen stay awake in vain. So He commends them to the care of God. The second reason, or the second purpose, is this: the disciples had become the belonging of Christ, the possession of Christ. We only keep those things that belong to us. We only employ the services of security. We only employ the services of watchmen to keep those things that matter to us, those things that we have a connection, those things that there is a bond between us and them. And if we are going to lose them, then there are going to be an effect between us, or there's going to be an effect in our lives because of losing those things. Christ tells God that all that you have given me are mine, and they are yours. God had given them to Jesus Christ. Now they had become Christ's. And God was the only keeper who could keep them. And now Christ commends them to God. They are Christ's and they are also God. In the physical absence of Christ, then there was no one who could be present apart from God. And there was no one who could be touched by the loss of the disciples except God, who the disciples first belonged to. So Christ takes them to their owner, who is God. And there is no one who can watch over the possession better than the owner. So Christ takes them back to the owner. The second purpose for why Christ asks the Father to keep them is this: the evil one was going to automatically come, because Christ says in the book of John 10:10 that the thief comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And who is the thief? The evil one. The evil one is the thief. And Christ understands that when the evil one would come, he would seek to scatter what Christ has gathered together. So Christ asks the Father that keep them, so that the evil one would not have the power to snatch them away. The other purpose is this: Christ wanted the disciples to remain united. He wanted them to have oneness. The book of John chapter number 17 verse 11. Christ says that let them be one as we are one. And that oneness could only be brought if God kept them. So Christ asks the Father to keep them. And that oneness was the oneness between God and Christ. And no one could create that oneness if not the Father. For it is the Father who had enabled oneness between Him and the Son. And it is now the Father who could enable oneness between the disciples. The last reason why Christ asks the Father to keep them is because the world hates them. The disciples were in the world. They were in a place whereby they were going to face hatred. Many times when we are facing hatred in our environment, we are always easily driven away from that environment, or give up the reason why we are hated and become conformed to the people who hate us, so that we cannot face their hatred. And Christ understands that if the disciples become conformed to the standards of those who hate them, then they are going to forsake the faith that Christ was handing over to them. And Christ is going to lose them. And Christ does not want to lose them. So He wants them in the midst of their enemies, in the midst of those who hate them, to be kept, to be maintained in their faith. And there was no one who could maintain them. Only God, who had overcome the world, could maintain them in their faith. So He commends them to God. My dear listener, you are under the care of God. Even though you are in the world where the enemy is there, where the haters are there, do not fear. God, who is keeping you, is bigger than the evil one, is bigger than the world. You are kept by Him who never changes, Him who is there continually. Look at God. Do not look at the things you are going to face. Look at God, because He who keeps you never sleeps nor slumbers. Be blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.